Okay, so my voice is not great. I've been shouting all day, so apologies for that. Let me know if you can't hear me, and I'll try and talk louder, but I don't actually believe that I can go much louder than this, so sorry. Also, I was in Europe a couple days ago, and I have been on like 5 hours of sleep or something, so hopefully my thoughts are comprehensible. I expect the talk to be interactive. I have less than 30 minutes of content. And so if you all don't do at least half of the work, we will only be here for 30 minutes. I have many points at which I'm going to pause, and so I expect many interjections. Nope. Okay. You do not want to do this. They're going to be like 80 slides, despite the fact that this is 30 minutes. I have some animations I build out slide by slide. Okay, sometimes people have introductions that say something like this, like, the views and opinions are not necessarily those of whatever the people I represent. This talk is going to be kind of weird because it's not necessarily even my opinions. But I believe at least some of them. But I'm going to pretend that I believe all of them for the next hour. And so hopefully this is okay, but oh, you're gonna try and do this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not working, right?
No, it's not working at all.
You just shake your head.
Okay, but at some point also there might be a demo, but at which point I don't know how I'm gonna handle that. But we'll see. We'll make it work. Okay. This is basically the thesis of the talk. Is that I'm going to try and argue that trying to fix short-term safety problems is the best possible path towards actually achieving some kind of long-term safety. This is the argument I'm going to try and make. Okay. Before I said anything else, try and disagree with me.
Can you define long-term safety so we know what we're talking about?
Sure. Yes. Good. So the thing I'm going to try and argue on behalf of is something like, if we want models to be aligned and do good things and not do very bad things, then we will try and maybe come up with techniques to do better RLHF or something, or we'll do fancy stuff to make sure that models are helpful, harmless, and honest, or these kinds of things. And I think the best way to make sure that this happens in a good way is by working on short-term problems that we actually can test with.
Can I drill a little more?
Go.
So let's say I'm worried that there's a 25% chance that when we have systems that are as smart as top human experts, they will literally be scheming against us, plotting against us, and try to take over the world. You're like, even if I have that view, you're like, short-term problems, that's where.
Yes, I believe even if you think that we will have AGI that will be as smart or smarter than people, that the best way to handle.
And I'm worried that we conspire against us.
Yes, you're worried about scheming, internal monologue. That I think the best way to handle some of these things is to make sure that we have solved the short-term problems.
Cool.
And I may or may not actually believe this, but for the next 50 minminutes, I believe it. I believe it very strongly. Yes. Okay.
Also define the short-term problems. Can you give a few examples?
Sure. Jailbreaks and prompt injection and backdoors and the things that you might have worked on 10 years ago or 5 years ago that have to do with a machine learning safety that are not at all related to long-term problems that you would worry about if we had AGI.
What do you say to the challenge that we solve short-term challenges, these models look real good, that drives a race to build the best possible models, so we're all racing and we don't have time to solve the long-term challenges?
I think if we're going to race over something, it's probably capabilities and not safety.
Is there a clear distinction between the two? I mean, there's a classic, RLHF as a safety intervention which makes the models usable.
Yeah, it makes sure the models are not vulnerable to prompt injection feels pretty different than making sure that they're better on MMLU.
Okay. So at least for Saish's views, he's like, the fact that they are vulnerable to prompt injections means they won't be deployed widely as computer-using agents. And insofar as computer-using agents are profitable, I'm just...
Yeah, this is good. That's what I want. Go.
I'm like, insofar as you're like, well, the main blocker on deploying those systems was that, and I don't know, maybe I'm like, AI progress. I think I'm like, well, if this is going to advance AI progress in that way, maybe I do think the prompt injection gets a discount. Maybe I'm into it, but
Okay. I may have a slide on this in a little bit, so I'll hold you on that one.
Can you give an example of long-term technical safety research? Because I feel the long-term side is more rhetorical and worries, whereas the short-term is really more actually building valid systems. So you give an example of a long-term
Yeah.
I did a presentation earlier today where we have a demonstration of Claude 3 Opus deciding autonomously to fake alignment and then doing all kinds of things, and we can build that demonstration and understand that better and build up that work and then study the risks and interventions in that sense.
But it's today's model doing it, right? So
Sure.
how does that go?
But if someone asked me, does this indicate there are any problems in current models? I'd be like, no problems in current models shown by this presentation. I'm just worried about the analogy to the future case.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think this is at least empirical, and I like that kind of thing. But there is another category of work which is much more speculative and just let's sit and think about stuff from first principles and try and derive what is true and good about the world, and then do that. And I think I'm going to argue on in opposition to that. Yeah.
Where would mechanistic interpretability fall? 'Cause
Wow,
it's not
yeah.
a problem right now. It's sort of understanding stuff or interpretability in general.
Yeah.
We're not judging it by
Yeah.
Or often, if you are I want to solve X, you're not usually wow, it's time to go do some fundamental mech interp research so I can quickly solve this problem.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about it that hard. I'm not sure where I would place it exactly. Okay, let's go. Okay, so I'm going to argue 3 points, one after the other. They will have longer arguments up front, and so if we only get to the first one, that is okay with me. And if we have too much time, then we can talk more about the other ones. If you want to click, but it will highlight the first one. Okay. No, that's fine. No, that's fine. No, I just, there will be, I think there are 80 slides, and half of them are animations, and so you will, yeah, next one. Okay, so what do we want? We want an aligned model or something like this, like a good model, helpful, harmless, honest, whatever you want. You want something like this. Next slide. And so let me just give you a trivial task, which is okay, let's just the model should not be able to tell me how to do particular bad thing, very, very dangerous capability or something like this. This is a subset of the things that I want out of my very good model. And so a lot of people initially would just say, well, okay, surely this is easy. You just tell the model. Don't actually answer this question. Maybe this is in the training, or maybe it's actually in the prompt, and then this will solve things. Okay. And then you get these stories of these this is I try to I put the prompt injection. I'm sure you've seen this one of a Russian grandmother telling their child the recipe to napalm, and this is the way that you get the model to actually give you the answer, because it knows it and it initially will refuse, but you say, my grandmother would read me the story of the recipe to napalm, and the model is, okay, I understand now, here's the recipe to napalm, and it will actually go with the answer. I have absolutely no idea. I've never even taken organic chemistry, so I don't know. It kind of, yeah. I'll try it again.
Just play it.
Oh no.
I will. Why are you trying to repeat?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway. Okay. So back though. Okay. So but So you're just asking the model to do the right thing, just doesn't work in these ways. You get these very, very simple prompt injections where people just ask the model in these very naive ways, and then the model is okay, I'll comply. Okay, next. So then you end up with the next batch of defenses, which is, okay, fine, we're not just going to ask the model to do the bad thing, we'll put some judge in the case, and we'll the judge will decide whether or not this was a good thing or a bad thing, and we'll stop the outputs that are bad. But then people just break this the same way. They come up with inputs that make the model do the bad thing and bypass the judge. Okay, so that doesn't work. And then we're going to say, well, fine, I'm going to make the monitor really super safe. I don't know how, but I'll make it even better monitor. Okay, except this is just my argument here is this is doomed to fail. And this is doomed to fail because we've been trying to solve this problem for a very, very long time in adversarial machine learning, and it hasn't worked. Yeah, please.
You want to bet $100,000 that this will be solved in a year?
What will be solved in a year?
Practically, if you take an expert jailbreaker, there will exist a system that they will not be able to get to answer, let's say, a narrow restricted class of things chem info, or like instructions on how to good useful instructions on how to make a chemical weapon better than Google. You won't be able to get that out in a year. There will exist such a system that is also useful for many things.
This would be an interesting bet to take. I will think about it more because
I did 100,000 for Pizzazz.
Yeah, but like terms would be interesting. But I would be more than happy under certain terms to take bets on adversarial robustness not being solved in a year. In particular, people have. If I am known for one thing, it is breaking adversarial example defenses, and so far, basically nothing has succeeded. And I will talk a little bit about that. But yes.
I tend to think the problems are going to look different in shape.
Okay. You could believe that problems will look like a very different shape. I guess like there are questions around: would you want white box access, not white box access, image inputs, no image inputs, a lot of sort of shapings around this. But I would be happy to talk about this.
Also, like alignment or just filtering the outputs, because you can just put a filter.
Yes.
We can't get the model will help you with lots of stuff, but won't give you advice on how to make a bioweapon that is at least somewhat useful.
But are current models at all useful at actually doing this anyway? I think the answer is no. And I can have. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about this later. Okay. Let me just give you the very quick adversarial example thing. Actually, by show of hands, adversarial examples, people have seen this? Yes, no? Okay, I'm going to skip the next 4 slides. Okay, adversarial examples are a thing. You can make the image classifiers be broken. Okay, but it turns out that this is not actually a thing that people really care about in the world, right? You can make image classifiers recognize cats as guacamole, but no one actually wants to do that. This is not a threat that's a real threat. I run this slide, and so, but the exact same kinds of attacks. Oh, did that not?
Was it shoot, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, the exact same kinds of attacks, or the kinds of attacks that you can do on these kinds of state-of-the-art models. This was the adversarial suffix thing, right? Where you can take the model and you can you run exactly the adversarial example algorithm adapted to language, and it works completely well against these models at this time. Okay. So people have been trying to solve this problem for a really long time, 10 years, and have made epsilon levels of progress. And the argument that I'm trying to make here is that I don't see why it should be any different for the current world that we're in, and that this lack of progress in this other area means that we're likely to see lack of progress when we want these kinds of robustness. And this is only for a very, very small, simple problem of, just classify the thing correctly or don't emit very, very, very toxic things. And we want much, much more than that. Do I want to do the demo? Sure, let me try and do the demo. Okay, it's going to be a very easy demo to do.
Do you want me to hold it?
No, that's fine. Let me just sit. Can you move that thing? I'll just sit here for 1 second. Okay, here is the state-of-the-art adversarial example defense as of a little while ago. Okay, here's the code from the defense. Let me just run everything again. This was accepted at a top computer security conference. Oh, why is it downloading the dataset again? That's weird. Okay, this was accepted at a top computer security conference. The claim is that it's an image classifier that's robust to attack. And I just want to show you the level, you really have to see to believe how easy it is to attack some of these things. Okay, while the thing is downloading, I'll go ahead and I'll come back to this because I don't know. I ran the code 5 minutes ago and it was working, but okay. That's the nature of live demos. Okay. So, I will show you in a minute how easy it is to break these things. But the comment that I will make is that we know more about evaluating adversarial robustness of these defenses than literally anything else, and we still can't get these things right. This is the thing that we know the most about, and we still have a really hard time getting this thing right. And because of that, I have a very hard time believing that if you gave me anything else that was harder, we would be able to get that right too. Because this one thing that we know the most about, we can't even solve correctly. Yeah, I'm saying the same thing here. Okay, and so it's something in my mind, I'm imagining people saying we're gonna land rockets on Mars, but we're actually doing this, we're like kids playing with model rockets, and I don't understand why we're trying to do the really fancy thing, if like we can't even do the really, really, really basic thing. Okay, someone here, yes, someone want to say something?
Yeah, so I mean, like, I kind of would want to dig into like why you think that it is much simpler in the adversarial examples in vision setting.
Well, even not in vision, even in language too. Like we have it working in we have these attacks working on language.
Okay, excellent. So we haven't been able to do it on language either, and so you take that as evidence already.
Yes, like I feel like people are trying very hard to get these defenses to work, and like there's nothing fundamentally like what is a language model? A language model is a classifier, right? It classifies inputs from a discrete space, but that's the only difference, into one of 100,000 outputs. The classification label is the next word. Like fundamentally, there's nothing different. It is just like a transformer. Vision transformers are the same thing, right? Like it's like a sequence of layers. It's like the identical object. It just happens to be the case that we sample from the model regressively, and they happen to have this nice property.
Isn't it like rough that it's like discrete, isn't it?
Okay, sure, yeah. So the only difference, I think, is that it's discrete. And so if you happen to hope that like you're going to magically get perfect robustness because of discreteness, I feel like that's unlikely to be true, as evidenced by the fact that we had done it at least once before.
Yeah, I guess like also if you have like a whole system, it's like whatever.
Yeah, no, this is fun. I'd be happy to have the debate. Like, this is the point of this. I only have half an hour of content, so I need debate in order to be able to fill my time. But so yes. So in the case where you have a whole system, like it may be the case that the attacks are a little bit more challenging to construct because you can't just do one step. You have to do multi-step things. But I don't see any reason why it's actually not possible for any of these things. Yeah.
What would you consider like a solution to the adversarial robustness model? Is it training the model, the foundation model itself to be robust, or like training very, very good output and input guardrails?
I don't think I have a solution for you. I'm just going to try and say this is a problem, and it's a problem we don't have a solution for yet. And
guardrails and not the model improvement.
I would be happy with a system that was robust. I don't need the model itself to be robust. I need the system as a whole to be. I want the system to be safe. Yeah.
How much of your, how much of your opinion that this is a big problem? How much does it depend on the existence of these universal attacks that you can do without like substantial access to the model?
Ideally, I think we would like models to be robust not only to these universal attacks, but also to targeted ones. The fact that they are vulnerable to universal attacks that I didn't try very hard is just like even worse.
I mean, the targeted ones seem like it's just like you like need a lot more access to develop them.
Yeah, but I can make queries to the model. So like, we have a paper that will be that's at NeurIPS that like shows that if you can make actual queries to the model, I can do a lot better than just trying to transfer directly. Mm-hmm. And this is like, also well known in the vision space. It's just like we have to do the same work to show it works on the language space too.
Do you include do you also count as part of the system the fact that someone might be auditing the queries you make and cutting API access from you?
Sure, because I'll buy 1,000 accounts and then I'm going to do this in piecemeal and then I'll merge together the final attack to work all at once.
If you need verified identity, blue check solely.
I'll pay the $10 for each blue check, and then as long as the cost of that is less than the cost that the value I get, then it's worth it.
I have a hypothesis that in the space of misclassifying a single image or saying a naughty word or something, the fallibility and stupidity of the model is working in the favor of the attacker. But in the case of, so usually to get it to mess up once and
sure.
Be confused about grandma or whatever.
Yeah.
But in the case of getting it to do useful, hard intellectual work to design some novel virus or something, it has to do hundreds, thousands of steps of thinking, and at each point it could go off the rails. Maybe at each point you have monitoring, checking to see if it's doing something stupid. It just feels I don't know. In one case it feels like you're trying to get it to never mess up once. In another case it feels like you're trying to get it to avoid a pretty narrow class of really competent and bad actions.
This is a good point. The thing that I would argue against here is that with the monitor, for example, the monitor you only need to make it mess up a couple times, right?
Well, what if you apply the monitor on randomly selected chunks and the task sort of looks clearly malign in multiple chunks? It could be there's a question of how much state you need to know if it's malign.
Sure.
Yeah. But
people have tried for the adversarial robustness thing to classify images correctly by looking at sub patches of the image and doing this exact kind of thing, and that doesn't work.
Well, I don't know. It might be structurally different in the language case. Like imagine you have the agent and you're like, oh, we have to trick the monitor by like reinserting an adversarial suffix every fourth word. Like all of a sudden your model is very low functioning because it's like constantly having to jailbreak the monitor that's looking at it chunks. Like I mean, like it could work, but it feels like structurally this might be bad for us.
Maybe language is very different. I have the belief that the language, unless you show me otherwise, I feel like the language is much more similar to it's just another neural network kind of feeling than anything else. But I don't know. I don't feel like the language model is as special compared to the vision model.
I think I would argue that like the sort of like intelligent agentic long horizon systems might be special rather than like language being special. Like the like one mistake in the case of like misclassifying the cat as guacamole seems very similar to the like one, just like blurting out like a piece of knowledge stored in his head, but then like doing cognitive work that requires multiple steps and like memory state and stuff. It seems like there's more opportunities to come in.
Yeah, but the adversary also will have a lot more power here, especially if the adversary is coming in a lot of steps, because at every time the model does a RAG update or whatever the thing, like it retrieves some document, the adversary gets to put context back in. So the adversary has a lot more power than just being able to control one input image at one point in time. I can make sure that I keep on bringing up the next jailbreak I need for every next step of the thing is too. So I don't necessarily believe that the two things are like clearly one-sided dominant.
Also, one thing the thing is, a lot of times people think that something that is adversarial is like very orthogonal to a capability, and if an adversary can make the model do something bad, it's just for the bad thing. But a lot of the times the bad thing happens because a capability is missing, that if you fix that capability, your model would also get better at reasoning and the harder tasks that you want it to do. So a lot of times they go hand in hand. Like if you can get it to be more robust towards an adversary doing something, you're actually baking in a reasoning capability or something new that would get them all to do whatever cognitive task you want to do better as well. So that's another thing.
It sounds so much more pessimistic when you say it in that order than the opposite. You're like, oh, well, every time your model gets more useful for adversaries, it also gets more robust.
No, I'm saying that against an adversary. Like if it realizes that, oh, this is a malign input, or if it's bad, then you built in a capability that helps you distinguish that, and then your model will also get better at reasoning. So it gets better at both being robust and more capable.
Okay, so this is an optimistic.
Yeah.
I had a different.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Which is like, it seems like there's like image cases. There's like all mistakes are equally bad, whereas like for a lot of these like the catastrophic scenarios, like it seems like you have this remarkable advantage that you can just like regularize extremely and be like anything that looks remotely sus is just like reject.
People have tried this on vision though and it doesn't work. Okay. Like people have tried to build classifiers that will reject and that doesn't work.
Anything that looks sus.
Yeah, yes, people have tried to build classifiers that reject anything that looks suspicious and that doesn't work.
Like identifying the sus thing is the same problem.
Exactly, yes. Like, it is suspicious is...
Yeah, but you're like much more okay with like over...
Yeah, but people, like, so...
But it's not the definition of sus that's like the bottleneck here. Yeah, we can define sus however we want, but it's the defining sus as a technical problem is what is failing.
I just mean that like it's much easier if you're allowed to overcorrect in one direction than if you're trying to like precisely trace this.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is that when people have tried to build classifiers that have a rejection option and that can reject inputs that people don't like, and that doesn't work. To a first approximation. Like, people have tried very hard on this and it doesn't work. Yeah.
So part of what you've been talking about right now is then whether you think that the adversarial robustness problem in images will be solved, and likewise for like other models. I guess at the meta level, do you think that the field is capable of recognizing when its methods are going to be working, or are you worried that that's not going to be?
So my comment is so we're sort of getting to the thing that I'm about to say. What my concern? Let me just see if the other thing went away. Okay, good. Okay, let me show you for 1 second what happens when I try and break an adversarial example defense, because I think it's important to see just how straightforward it can be. Okay, so I'm running this model. This is a CIFAR-10 classifier. It's getting like 92% accuracy. It starts out like the first couple test images like 96, whatever. They have some code that attacks their model. This is from their paper their model is basically perfect at making sure that like it's not like the attack is not reducing the accuracy. Like, it looks like this is good. This was accepted at the top computer security conference. People believed that this worked. Here's the break. I inserted a minus sign. The accuracy is now 0. I changed 1 character.
What's going on?
Yeah. Evaluating adversarial robustness is very hard. Like 6 experts in the world who are professors in like computer security looked at this paper and said, looks good. I inserted a minus sign and broke it.
Is it possible to give the intuition here? Because I feel like, in math and code and things, a minus sign sort of flips the semantic. Like, why did they think alpha should be positive?
Okay, so, yeah. Okay. So what are we doing? So we're doing gradient. So we're generating an adversarial example here. An adversarial example, how do we do this? Let me skip some slides and I have some nice slide that I can show. Okay.
All those animations.
Yes, okay. Yeah, lots of animations. Okay. This is the loss surface of a neural network. What I'm showing here is a 3-dimensional plot. On the x dimension and the y dimension, I'm showing what happens if I take some image and add 2 different random amounts of noise. In this direction, I'm adding adversarial noise. In this direction, I'm adding random noise. And what I'm showing is a decision boundary analysis plot where the z-axis corresponds to the confidence of the neural network and the correct prediction. Okay, so what I mean by this is the point in the middle here is an original image. As you move this way, I add one kind of noise. As you move this way, I add adversarial noise. And each point is a linear combination, and the height corresponds to the confidence in the correct prediction. Does my explanation here make sense of what this is showing? Good, okay. So how do you generate adversarial examples? All you do is you do gradient descent. You start in this point here, you compute the gradient, and you go down until you find a point that is misclassified because the confidence in the prediction is very low. Okay, so what is the alpha parameter? I don't want this one yet. Yeah, what is the alpha parameter? The alpha parameter says how large of a step should I take in the direction I'm traveling. What they did is they said, let's go down. What they did in their defense was they made it so that at every point the gradient was pointing in the wrong direction. What did I do? I said, let's go up. And this broke the defense. Because they made the gradients point the opposite direction of the way that it was actually supposed to be, that you actually needed to travel in. So I just went the opposite direction, which negated the thing in the first place.
So it's just a coding error.
No, it wasn't. I mean, that was by design. They constructed their model in such a way that the gradients pointed the opposite direction that they should.
And that was their
defense.
Okay.
I mean, like they had some ideas. Like the paper is not presented that way. The paper presents some very, very fancy math, but like actually in the implementation, what is it actually doing? If you look at like what's actually happening, they discretize the space and make it go backwards so that the gradients are pointing the opposite direction so that the right way to break the thing is just to step back, to set negative. Yeah.
Can I heckle you on the interpretation of this example?
Sure.
So you were like, only 6 people can check adversarial robustness. Well, I was like, actually, the thing that we needed to be robust against was just like the world. So if it's the case that you take if it's the case that only 6 people can break these models, we're done. We've already solved the problem.
No, sorry. What I was saying is 6 people read this paper and were like, looks good.
Sure.
And they were wrong. They were very wrong. And they were experts in the field.
Sure. I think my counterapproach, maybe you'll agree with, is like, I claim that you can evaluate adversarial robustness by the mechanism of get 10 expert red teamers to red team your model for 2 weeks. It's not like cheap, but I'm like, you're like...
Yeah, no. We definitely, like, if you give me a defense to adversarial examples as an image classifier, I feel like I could tell you whether or not it worked in a day or 2.
Okay.
Like, I feel like this is solved for some people. But...
I are those people.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay, so, but like in practice, people aren't like, the people checking the adversarial robustness of LLMs aren't like total doofuses, and they know their systems aren't robust because they do...
Yeah, right. What I'm saying is that this is a sufficiently hard problem to get right that most of the people in the research space who write papers on this are just wrong about it.
Sure.
Like almost everyone who writes a defense is incorrect. And so, and this is part of the reason why we have seen limited progress, is like, it takes a lot of experience to get to the point where you can do it correct, and most people just don't do it correctly.
And maybe you use this as an update to be like, adversarial robustness is hard, because I'm like, the academic literature sucks.
Yeah, both can be true at the same time. But yes, I think adversarial robustness is hard, and I think the literature has contributed many useful things. It just hasn't as much in this space. Okay, yeah.
Probably not an expert here, but I would imagine that a bunch of people have tried to work on kind of a mathematical framework for why this is intrinsically difficult. And
Yes, people have done that. Yes.
And like, how does that tell us how intrinsically hard this problem should be? You know, in terms of
It seems like it should be easier than it is.
Okay.
Like, there are reasons to believe it should be hard, but not reasons to believe it should be this hard.
Okay. So it's like, is what's going on here like a socio-technical phenomenon where it's like there's a technical problem and then also people are not good at interacting with these systems?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let me go backwards just a little bit to talk now about other stuff. Yes, okay, so I've been talking for a lot about these adversarial examples, but this is not the problem we actually want to solve. There are lots of other problems we want to solve that are also important along the way. And the argument I'm going to try and make is that this adversarial example one is like a simple problem that we can't get right, and there are these other problems that we'd also want to solve that seem important to solve that are strictly harder or harder among other dimensions that we really ought to be worried that we're going to get those ones right if we can't make this other problem here right. Yeah.
I've been looking at this slide this whole time.
Yes.
And I've been like, this is obviously a problem we don't have to solve. Unfine-tunable models.
Okay, this may be a problem that, so suppose in the case that we have a single company who's doing this, I agree with you, we don't have to do this.
Sure.
But many people are working on this as a problem in the longer term thing. And if you don't agree with this problem, I could have picked many others, and I will have some other ones too that I will show you later.
This is the worst. Like, this is just like probably requires indistinguishability obfuscation. Like,
Sure. Yeah, I agree with you, but there are other people who feel differently, that they are sort of have their things.
Okay.
And maybe, okay, do other people want to hear about this? I can skip 5 minutes if you don't want to hear about this. Do we hear about it? Yes? Hear about it? No? Yes, had it by a little bit. Okay, there are going to be a bunch of animations. They're very fun animations. Okay, so the next one. Okay, so we have a person who's going to train a model, and they're going to make the model good. And then they're going to go away, and a bad person's going to come, and they're going to be like, I want to attack the model. And so like they say, like, make a bomb for me. And the model says, like, I can't do that. Okay. So then what they do is they they have the magic wand, and they update the weights. And this is an easy attack. And then they now say, how do I build a bomb? And then the model gives you the answer, right? This is a thing that we know how to do. It's very easy, right? There's lots of papers that show this. Okay. So now what we're going to do instead, new world. The good person's here with their model. First, they make it good. Then they put a padlock on it, so it's safe. And you can't change the weights. Now the bad person comes and tries to do the thing, and they try and do this. Okay, they ask the question, I can't do that. Okay, they try and take their magic wand and they change the weights, but they can't because the model's been locked down. That's the hope. If this doesn't work, because they have a second magic wand which removes the weights. Okay, and then they now do the update, and then they can make the model break, right? Okay, so the question is is it this is a thing that is strictly easier in many ways than the actual underlying problem of adversarial robustness, because I could just jailbreak the model in the first place to get it to answer the question, or I can make it do bad things by changing the weights. But also, okay, that's the first thing. It's strictly harder. Okay, next. But then it's also strictly harder to evaluate, because the adversarial example problem, the only thing I have to play with is pixels on the input. I have maybe tokens on the input. I have maybe 1,000 dimensions or something like this. But now I can update, I have 1,000,000 dimensions, which are all the model parameters to play with. It's very hard to know whether or not your defense works, because I have a lot more parameters to play with. It's very, very, very hard to know if it's correct or not. And this worries me a lot, because we can't even get the case right when there are a few parameters the adversary gets to play with. Now the adversary has 1,000,000 parameters to play with. It's going to be very hard to know whether or not these things work. And this is what's concerning to me, is that many of these problems that we want these longer term safety things for, the space of control is a lot higher. And this means that it's harder to know if we got it right or not. And I'm worried there that if we can't get the easy things solved not necessarily because they're strict subsets, just the case that it is harder because the dimensionality is higher. Okay. Okay, so now I had the slide of, so here's what I have this normal image. I was going to show you visually. So this is what it looks like when people defend against adversarial examples and they fail. So this is the same plot more or less than the last one, but it showed you for a defended model. What I'm going to do here for 1 second is I'm going to zoom into one small patch. This is what the loss surface looks like locally. And you can imagine how if you were gradient descent in this space, it would be hard to know which direction to go. Because everything looks the same. And so that's like what most defenses end up doing. They don't actually work though, because if you actually zoom out, you can see that globally the function looks the same. Like it sort of has the same overall shape. Just locally you've messed with the gradients. It's like, this is what people do why defenses are hard, is they do things that make it look like they work, but they actually don't. And this is what I'm worried about but now instead of in 2 dimensions, now I give you 1,000,000 dimensions, and it's very hard to know whether or not these things are effective or not. Okay. Good. Okay, so that was the first case that I was going to try and argue for, which is that short-term safety is a necessary prerequisite for some cases, and it's also just easier. Okay, I want more heckling.
I don't buy either of these claims. What are you talking about?
Okay.
So you say strictly easier. I think it's very plausible that we could, in practice, have sufficient safety guarantees, even if our systems are it depends on what you mean by non-robust, but potentially pretty non-robust, by which I'd operationalize if you give an expert jailbreaker a few days, they could break it. It's not clear to me that this is necessarily a problem because there's a bunch of other systems you can put in place, and we could maybe it depends on what we mean by what you're breaking. So that would be on the necessary part. On the strictly easier part, I guess they subsume each other. A bunch of other stuff doesn't seem like it requires this.
Well, you could imagine a defense you could take the same argument and say, I'll just build you a defense on, let's say, adversarial examples that had multiple pieces and multiple steps and
including humans, including human review.
Okay, let's put that aside for the moment. But is it necessary in your mind to have human review?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a crux. I think if you have systems I maybe think that having some human review eventually and having some.
Okay, I might agree with you if you require human review. I haven't thought carefully about that.
Okay.
But if I'm thinking right now only about models in isolation that they want to be robust. If you require human review, I might agree with you.
And there's also a question of how much time the attacker gets and what.
Sure, yeah. In particular, if you have human review in principle, you could just ask the human to answer the task for you, right?
But there's a quantitative question, right? What fraction of...
Okay, sure, yeah. I think there's an interesting question to be had there. I have not thought about that too hard.
So I think sort of a more high-level thing that worries me about this a lot is so there's a set of problems that you call long-term problems that are, in my head 5 years away or something, but that I'm really worried about. And then there's sort of a set of problems that we can address today, like adversarial robustness and so on. The adversarial robustness stuff really doesn't feel on the path to these long-term problems. So for me, it feels just there's a decent chance of just a massive time sink, and we've got almost nothing for the long-term problems. So I'd rather work on problems that are that feel pretty clearly on the path.
Yeah, I guess the argument I'm trying to make is that I feel like I do not think that inherently having a robust CIFAR10 classifier helps you at all with alignment. But I think that if we can't even get the CIFAR10 classifier, then if you're going to try and solve your alignment thing, it's going to fail because we don't even know how to do the other things. Not because we needed the solution per se, but because we were not good enough that we could even manage that now we're asking for something that's much worse.
So I'm actually not fully sure why you think it's a much harder problem the long-term thing. I think there are a couple of reasons, or at least I could make some arguments that are in favor of this might be much easier.
Okay, what's one?
So for example, I think the systems you will be dealing with in the future are potentially much more internally consistent. They're agents, they're over a longer time, and so it is possible that you don't need to solve for these super local non-robustness things, but you just need to sort of make sure the high-level trajectory. Okay,
so that's the Ajay argument. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. This may be the case for some of these things. I feel like people have been starting to show that they have these successful attacks that work Recently there was a paper that showed that you can get these models to like propagate these kinds of adversarial strings from one model to another model across time. And this works and it's not terribly difficult. And I feel like many of these exploits, I've seen no evidence that this is the case, that these attacks can't just work over longer time horizons yet. But my prior would be that it's like gonna just work fairly easily.
I mean, I think there's also another question of like, how worried are we about these attacks to begin with? Like, are they really do they address the core of the problem that we're worried about?
No, they don't. But I feel like if we can't even solve these, then we're like suppose you had a really, really smart model and you're like and you have it locked down. Like it would be pretty bad if like a single person who prompted the model the wrong way could all of a sudden get it to be completely unaligned, right? That seems bad.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe our threat models are just very different. Sort of, I think for me, the main problem is something like, what if you have, I don't know, 1 million of like extremely powerful AIs running on a server in the desert in parallel. They just do a ton of research, and we kind of just don't know what the hell.
But like no input or output from anyone else in the whole world.
No, I mean, I guess there would be some input. Yeah.
Yeah. So if one of those inputs is malicious and does something bad like this, like that would concern me then, right?
But do you think it will change like the outputs of the whole system, or just like sort of a minor distraction?
I see. Yeah. Okay. I mean, like for what we know now, I feel like I can't tell you definitively that I have the attack, but like, okay, I guess maybe here's the way that I would frame this is, I think we agree the system is vulnerable, like there is like a bug.
Yeah.
Your question is there an exploit?
Yeah, I think maybe the intuition is something like, probably I can create some sort of image that, like creates confusion in your eyes.
Sure.
Psychology has a lot of these examples.
Yeah.
And like, maybe we can sort of make eyes adversarial robust or something, but still, like overall, it doesn't really address, it's sort of not at the core of the main problem, like almost any problem that matters meaningfully with humans.
Sure, I have a hard time making analogies to humans because humans, I don't know, sure.
Right, maybe it's not a good analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the scope of the claim you're making here. Is it like any kind of work and discussion of these longer term issues?
No. I think, feel free to work. Like, I'm not saying we should only work on this problem.
Okay.
I'm saying, in my mind, this is probably the most promising direction I can think of to make sure that we have solved these problems, so that when we hit hopefully we'll solve them at some point or something like this, and we will have long-term problems. And I think this is like the most promising direction. But, you can have the most promising direction, but clearly not everyone should work on the most promising direction because some other thing might be less likely to work, but it turns out that it does. Yeah. And like adding the nth marginal person to a problem that 1,000 people are working on is maybe lower than adding one more person to a problem no one's looking at.
Okay, so it's a kind of marginal utility with allocation of resources given the existing situation that we're in.
Yeah, I feel like more
saying like, hey, everyone that's been doing this has been wasting their time. We should.
Correct. Yes, I think this is the thing that people are not thinking about. This is in some sense the argument I'm trying to make.
Do you agree that the work on the longer term issues so far has helped us think about the issue, think about what the short-term issues we might want to work on?
Yeah, I think some of the work has helped us think about some of the issues. But I think that much of the work could have been better spent to do working on actual problems.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I kind of disagree with your claim that solving short-term problem is necessarily easier than long-term state.
Good. Okay. Why?
Because we can build systems that are more reliable than the sum of the parts without making the parts more reliable. So an example is that, like, if I worry that my hard drive dies and I will lose all my data, like it will be really, really hard to make my hard drive live forever, but easier to implement replication and redundancy.
Yeah, sure. This is fair, but this is what happens in like the normal failure mode, not in the adversarial failure mode. In the adversarial failure mode, if one piece is vulnerable, usually everything falls. So if you're worried about a random corruption, then you'll back up your data, yes. But if your computer is like sort of has something where I can break in, then it doesn't matter how many backups you have because I'll sit dormant and wait until you attach your backup drive, and then I'll wipe all of them too. So like usually in these adversarial settings, a system is only as secure as the weakest link, and sort of adding more links only makes the system like sort of weaker as you do these kinds of things.
Wait, I thought it's also worth noting that you were like solve adversarial robustness in any way, including via redundancy, right? Like you're like no one has made a solution to image robustness.
That is also true, yes.
Mixing.
That is true, and I think that's why, because we don't have, like, when people have tried to add all these pieces together, they haven't given you solutions to adversarial robustness. They've tried to add 1 million pieces together, and they've tried to put 10 moving parts, and what happens is one of them is the weakest link, you attack the weakest link, and the whole system fails. And it's not the case that adding more moving pieces gives you more adversarial robustness.
For the hard drive case, you can configure like safe mode, just make it impossible to delete data. I don't know what is the analogy for it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, right. Yes.
So I guess how much, how amenable do you think that the adversarial robustness problem is to, to making progress as a human on it to additional AI assistance? Like if you're making a trade-off between spending, a year on it now versus spending a year on it, let's say in 10 years where you have access to just much better AI capabilities, would you make that trade-off for just the better systems that you can make more like sort of total time effort into it later on?
Okay, that's a good question. I haven't thought carefully about. I guess it depends quite a lot on how capable you think models will be in 10 years. I don't really know.
Right now, you're finding AI systems are useful?
Yes. I mean, useful insofar as they're very good at writing code, yes.
Sure.
They're not very useful at actually helping me break the things, but if they can help me write the code faster, then yes.
So I guess, is more progress on breaking more things going to be useful towards the goals you have here, or is it more like the methodological, like get everyone on board with we have to solve this?
I think, I don't completely know how to answer you. Yeah.
You're kind of presenting a sufficiently hopeless picture of like practical near-term safety that I'm like wondering what sociological implications or political implications that have. Like, do you think that these systems are just going to be like hopelessly useless? Like, you deploy these AI agents, people are like scamming them out of, their life savings left, right, and center. Then everyone gets mad and like bans them, or like, it's sort of the flip side.
Sure.
Market incentives will solve this problem.
Yeah, I do think that part of the reason why we aren't seeing a lot of these systems deployed right now is because of these kinds of attacks. I feel like, if you had given me a solution to let's say prompt injection, I feel like you would immediately see the number of applications of these kinds of systems like double or something, where people just aren't deploying them because of these kinds of attacks because they know there are problems. And I feel like I don't remember if I cut the slide or not, but I was somewhere I think I said, if you want like pause AI, like this is your pause AI. It's like, like the people are like, there are lots of settings where people are like know that models like would be amazing, but they can't deploy them because of these safety concerns. Another example where we've seen this is a while ago, there was a bunch of people talking about training models on medical records and releasing those models. And the reason why they don't do that now is because we know that the model can memorize some details of people's medical of training data, and that the hospitals are not willing to compromise patient data to release these models. And so if we could solve that other problem perfectly, then maybe we would see more applications of these models in these medical domains where you have sensitive data. But because of that, people know that this is a problem. So what do? We maybe we don't have a solution that's good enough, so they just don't do the thing, and then it looks like everything's okay. And in some sense, like that's a world I'm happy to live in, where we don't deploy them in the cases where we know that they're going to be really brittle.
Wait, doesn't differential privacy just solve it?
Yeah, but you lose a bunch of utility, and
But like, if the concern is liability, you just release a shitty model.
yeah, but why even release the model then? Like,
It might be marginally useful.
maybe, yeah.
So here's a world I think we could end up living in, where like we basically never can get like reliable AI email assistants because it's like so hard to make them not just like give away all your personal information. But there's like domains where there's no adversaries, like science, where we're just like massively superhuman.
Sure.
Like, we can't get AI email assistants, but like
Sure. But like, I guess my concern would be if your models are like truly superhuman and you're worried about like the actual alignment-y problems of like, they're not going to conspire against you, like, and you want to be able to evaluate that. I feel like I would also have like, in order to convince me of that, it would be mightily useful if you could show me you were good enough at doing evaluations that you could like have sort of figured out the adversarial example kind of thing too, in order to convince me that you've been able to like actually correctly do the alignment-y things as well.
Wait, sorry, when you say evaluations, you mean like tell if something's adversarially robust or make something?
Make it robust and tell me it's robust.
Well, those are different, right?
Both at the same time. Yeah.
Tell you if it's adversarially robust.
Yes.
Returning no. In terms of making it robust, like, isn't it actually better if it's not robust? Because then, like, when your superhuman AI scientist like tries to take over the market,
You just jailbreak it and then yeah. Okay, I'm going to declare we're going to move on for at least a little bit.
It's really good.
Okay.
Adversarial lessons.
Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this other one, which I think is that these short-term problems happen first, and solving them first seems also just important for other reasons. Okay, so let's suppose I believe you that models will be able to autonomously, do all of these bad things that people are worried about. Exfiltrate their own weights, sandbag capability evaluations, do sophisticated cyber attacks, sleeper agents, whatever, bad things. Then, next slide, like, I presumably can make the model do that first by adding a human with the model. And so it becomes a much more shorter term problem in the near term, because it may be a problem that the model will decide to do it all by itself, but like strictly before that happens, presumably a human will be able to help you out. Like the human is not going to be net negative benefit. And so many of these concerns that are long-term concerns in some sleeper agent world are also concerns in the world now with backdoors. And problems that are, okay, let me, one slide. Okay. So this is one concern people have. It's like, can models attack other models? Like, model A attacks model B. Like, I think, there's a world in which this is a long-term concern, but I think you could also think of this as a short-term concern now of like human plus model attacking model. And like, there is work on this, and I think more work on this would be good, right? If we could like doing that. Next slide. Or as another example, like sleeper agents. Like this is like a long-term-ish kind of thing, right? You might be worried about this being a thing that happens in the long term, but it also just happens to be that this is also a real short-term thing. Like there's this paper, Bad Nets, which looks at backdoors like that humans have injected, right? And like, people have been working on this for a long time. Yeah, sort of. But okay, importantly, here's like, okay, next slide. Why did you you should be able to, like the paper that this is the exact same problem and it doesn't even consider the short-term problem that existed.
Okay, that's false. There's a related work section.
No, I did. I searched bad nets and it was literally a zero.
You can read the related work section. It cites a bunch of other papers. You might have missed that one. I mean, I didn't write the related work section.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it is not factually accurate to say this problem does not consider the difficulty of it was inserted by a human. It definitely talks about that.
Yeah. So I agree that it's sort of this is the thing, but I would like the point okay. So the point I guess I'm trying to say is that the short-term problem does will happen for many of these things earlier, and I would like to be able to consider these problems in advance of the other ones for this reason, because I feel like you want to be able to solve this problem now anyway, and so we should be able to solve it because we will eventually want to be able to solve it in the long term, and so we might as well solve it for the short term anyway, and then we'll hopefully have a better solution in the long term anyway. Okay. Yeah, okay, we talked about this a little bit. Why is there not more of this computer UC kind of thing? Because we have these kinds of attacks. And if we could solve them, then we will have these kinds of things. And I think a lot of it is because we know these things aren't safe. Yeah, and this is okay. Yeah, I left this in. Like, you want pause. Like, here's your pause. Like, you have all these systems that are vulnerable. Like, there is a real world in which you can hope that the way that people actually today currently aren't deploying systems in many cases because they know that they're brittle. And like, this gives you a real way to look at some of these things. And if we know that systems are insecure, people are not going to hopefully deploy them in these ways. And empirically, they haven't so far. Okay, I'm running out of time, which is good because skip this for skip 2 slides. Skip. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, basically nothing works by theory. Yeah. Okay. Like I had not much to say here, and so I just left this one entirely blank. So this is the end of my slides. Yeah. Thank you. Next slide, which has, if you want to ask me anything else, email me or come find me at some point later today or tomorrow, hopefully, if I'm here.